Live in Western Oregon, this is NBC 16 News at 5.
In the middle of this global pandemic, we are working diligently to prioritize public health and safety for our communities.
Oregon lawmakers hope to solve a $1 billion budget shortfall. Lawmakers are tackling state spending, but police reform is also on the table. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jacqueline Mazer. Now, Oregon lawmakers returned to the state capitol Monday for the second special session of the year. In the first special session, lawmakers addressed the COVID-19 health crisis and calls for police accountability. This special session is focused on several bills addressing cuts, but lawmakers are considering a bill that clarifies the use of chokeholds. Both Democrats and Republican lawmakers say they support the measure.
With bipartisan support from both sides, both the House and the Senate, I think they've been well considered. There was a lot of public testimony that went into passing those bills, and I think we'll be as quick as we can, as responsibly as we can, and move those bills through.
If they're ready to go, and I believe they are, we would be remiss to put them off.
Lawmakers must also address funding for schools and unemployment benefits. Lawmakers say they will have to make some difficult cuts. As Oregon lawmakers try to balance the state budget, transportation officials also have budget issues to deal with, not only for this year, but all the way out to 2024. COVID-19 travel restrictions hit travel on Oregon highways in the spring, and that put a hit on gas tax revenue. Spring office closures for the Department of Motor Vehicles also put a hit on revenue for ODOT. That's because 1/3 of the state highway fund depends on driver's license and motor vehicle fees from the DMV.
When people choose to not buy another vehicle because they don't have a job or maybe they're not driving as much, then that's less revenue coming into the state highway fund.
This means a $170 million revenue loss for ODOT in 2020, and next year growing to an estimated $250 million by 2024. This amount is split between cities, counties, and ODOT, so the impact will be felt statewide. Brower says basic ODOT services will also be affected, from filling potholes to finding money for future road construction. Now to a look at COVID-19 cases in Oregon today. The Oregon Health Authority reports 227 new cases and 1 new death. An 88-year-old man from Multnomah County. Statewide, 357 people died and more than 21,000 people tested positive since the pandemic began. Today, Multnomah County reported the most new cases with 45. Nearly 2,000 people are currently hospitalized in the state. Some businesses in Eugene are already wondering what the economic forecast will be like once COVID-19 is finally over. Millions of Americans who've lost their jobs during the pandemic are living with uncertainty, as business experts warn the recovery depends on how long COVID lasts. Businesses are wondering how they will stay afloat or rebuild after a shutdown, and that creates concerns over the amount of jobs that will be available once the pandemic is over.
Right now, a lot of businesses, I think, are, they're fearful of the unknowns of this fall. We have a lot of employers who are really struggling to figure out how to best support their employees, specifically those who have kids in the school system.
Coming up tonight on your only local news at 5:30, our Angelina Dixon talks to one business owner who says they've just opened up downtown. Learn more how they're progressing during COVID. Well, live look at the Capitol tonight, where there is still no deal between Congress and the White House on coronavirus relief. Weeks of failed negotiations led President Trump to sign 4 executive orders, which are being questioned by some in his own party. National correspondent Atra Elnashar shows us what leaders say still needs to be done.
Millions of Americans in need of relief are watching Congress closely, waiting for a deal between Democratic leadership and the White House.
We want to come up with a strong plan.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, along with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, say White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin won't agree to their offer to spend $2 trillion instead of their original ask of $3 trillion.
You know what they said? Absolutely not. I said to them, you mean it's your way or the highway? And they said, yep.
Mnuchin, who is known for working well with Democrats, giving a more optimistic outlook.
I heard Pelosi over the weekend and Schumer, and I think they're willing to compromise.
Mnuchin says they're close to agreeing on how much to spend on food assistance, but they don't appear any closer to agreeing on funding for states and other issues not covered in the president's new executive orders. Orders the president says will lead to a bigger deal in Congress.
They're much more inclined to make a deal now than they would have been 2 days ago.
Some doubt the legitimacy of the executive orders. Republican Senator Ben Sasse says it's unconstitutional for the president to unilaterally declare a payroll tax holiday. Others question its value if Americans will eventually have to pay it back. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany defends the orders and blames any gridlock on Democrats.
What we are doing is entirely within the executive capacity of the president. The real solution, the holistic solution, rests with Congress and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer coming to the table.
McEnany says the White House will work around the clock, trying to get this relief to Americans soon. In Washington, I'm Ashra Nishar reporting.
In sports, growing concern tonight that the college football season will be either canceled or postponed. NBC 16 sports director Brandon Cameraman joins us live from his home to sort out the rumors, speculation, and facts. Brandon.
Jacqueline, this week is shaping up to be perhaps the most significant in the history of college football. Now, that may seem like a hyperbole to say that, but back in March, the thought of a possibly canceled or postponed football season in the fall seemed almost laughable. Well, it's not laughable anymore. Two FBS conferences have already canceled their fall seasons, the MAC and the Mountain West. The Big Ten is reportedly discussing that possibility and may announce it by the end of the night, and the Pac-12 board is set to meet tomorrow, where Oregon and Oregon State's football futures and the other teams in the leagues, they are perhaps going to be discussed at that point. As of now, I did confirm with both UO and OSU, they held their mandatory football workouts today. So it's business as usual in a sense in Corvallis and Eugene. There's no question the fate of the 2020 season is in dire straits. Multiple reports say over the weekend the Pac-12's medical advisory board threw further caution into the season due to concerns over lingering heart issues that may or may not be caused by COVID-19, but that could be enough to push the conference to cancel its fall season, which would lead to so many ripple effects we can't even get into now, but we will get into them if it indeed happens. It hasn't happened yet. The Pac-12 football schedule is still on the calendar, but it might not be, and that could come as soon as tomorrow. Live from home, Brandon Cameraman. Let's send it back to you.
All right, Brandon, thanks for that update tonight. Well, new campfire restrictions now in place on the Willamette National Forest. All campfires, charcoal or briquette fires, pellet fires, or any other open fires will be prohibited outside of designated campgrounds and select wilderness. The decision is based on a drier than usual July and higher than average temperatures predicted for August and September. So far in 2020, 86% of wildfires in Oregon were started by people. Well, taking a live look outside now in Eugene, Chief Meteorologist Josh Cozart has our first look at weather now.
It was another toasty day across western Oregon. We managed to climb back up into the mid-90s through the I-5 corridor, even out along the coast, right around average into the 60s. But look at Gold Beach, nearly 80 degrees for our high today. Radar and satellite over the past several hours showing calm, quiet, and clear conditions. A few clouds racing their way down to the south just off the coast. But due to the lack of rainfall, we've bounced ourselves back up to high fire potentials for Coos and Douglas County after residing in the moderate range over much of our weekend. Tonight, we fall back into the low 50s, more sunshine yet again tomorrow, but we go from today's 80s and 90s to the mid 80s tomorrow, and then even cooler temperatures still right around the corner. We'll discuss that in my full forecast.
The police union building in Portland has become the focus of protesters and demonstrators, with police declaring a riot several nights in a row now and making several arrests in the process. President Trump says it's time to activate the National Guard in Portland. He says the city is, quote, out of control, and accuses the mayor and governor of risking lives. Last week, the mayor condemned efforts to light fires in front of a police precinct. His office says he had no comment on demonstrations over the weekend. Today, the White House press secretary addressed Mayor Wheeler's comments last week following his criticism of federal officers several weeks ago.
It is a drastic change. It took him 73 days, I suppose, to come up with that realization. And what we're seeing in Portland with 6 nights in a row, riots being declared, this is unacceptable, and it is encouraging to see that the liberal mayor of Portland finally seems to realize that.
A spokesperson for the Oregon National Guard says the activation can only come from an order by the governor or a request from a county. In this case, Portland city leaders would have to request the National Guard through Multnomah County. So far, no request was made. 16 people that were arrested last night. Police declared a riot near the Portland Police Association building shortly after crowds arrived. They say within 3 minutes, people started barricading the streets with dumpsters and fencing. A fire was also lit on the sidewalk outside the PPA office. Police say no tear gas was deployed. Coming up next on NBC 16 at 5, a deadly gas explosion in Maryland is under investigation. What damage it left behind for several homeowners. And still ahead, more affordable housing will soon be available after $61 million in grants and tax credits. How many new homes could be built in Eugene?